Hi, I'm Izzy Sasso.
I'm Brennan Grimes, and this is Crash Course World History. And today we're studying Nazi medical experiments.
Wow. Over the course of World War II, there were up to 70 medical experiment projects conducted by Axis Powers researchers, typically aimed at increasing the technologies for Axis soldiers. These so-called physicians were able to work freely within many concentration camps without any regard to basic medical ethics and the health of patients involved.
One type of experiment that was very popular during this time were those that were utilized to test human endurance. For example, at the Dachau camp, there were tests conducted by Sigmund Rascher. Popular during this time were those that were utilized to test human endurance. For example, at the Dachau camp, there were tests conducted by Sigmund Rascher and other scientists in which prisoners were submerged in freezing water tanks for hours at a time, and then the physicians attempted to revive them using various methods. Many prisoners died as a result of hypothermia, suffocation, and infections.
Another example of endurance test in the high-altitude experiments performed by Sigmund Rascher in 1942 at the Dachau camp. He and other scientists were interested in finding how best to save German pilots that had to be ejected at high altitudes. He subjected hundreds of prisoners to pressures that were extremely low, using a tank that could replicate altitudes up to 68,000 feet. Over 80 prisoners reportedly died immediately during or after the trials, and 200 others were said to be executed to prevent them from sharing Nazi secrets.
At Ravensbrück camp, physicians wished to find how best to treat battlefield wounds of Axis soldiers, and a few common infections that were causing deaths for the German army were gas gangrene, strep, and tetanus. They developed a drug called sulfonamide to treat these infections. They gathered hundreds of prisoners and gave them horrific battlefield-like wounds, and then rubbed them with glass and dirt to make them authentic war wounds. Once they festered and became infected, the doctors would use sulfonamide to try and treat them. Almost all of the prisoners died as a result of complications of these large flesh wounds and agony.
Several other experiments of this nature were done with diseases like tuberculosis and several types of measles, wherein prisoners were purposely infected and then the doctors tried various medications and treatments to help attempt to cure them. A particularly disturbing trend that happened at most concentration camps that conducted medical trials were repeated accounts of doctors attempting to transplant body parts, including whole human limbs and bones. These prisoners suffered mutilation and permanent disabilities.
The Nazis were not only interested in endurance tests and medical breakthroughs. Part of Hitler's plan, remember, was to create the perfect race of people and make the German/Aryan race dominant over all others. Part of this plan was to eradicate all genetic and hereditary diseases from the German lineage. Sterilization of these people with diseases was seen as the best option. However, scientists needed to find the safest way to sterilize people, thus they tested many different methods on thousands of prisoners, including subjecting genitalia to radiation and castration. Due to these methods being underdeveloped, these sterilized prisoners suffered untold horrors, resulting in death in many cases.
Relatedly, the German government wanted to make it possible for as many perfect Aryans to reproduce as possible. So after hearing about Dr. Karl Klauberg successfully artificially inseminating a high-leveled officer's wife, Heinrich Himmler ordered him to continue insemination experiments. Over 300 women at Auschwitz were forcibly inseminated, and Klauberg reportedly tortured them and told them that he had just impregnated them with animal DNA, and that they now had horrible monster hybrids growing inside of them. But I mean, who doesn't want a hybrid going inside of them, you know what I'm saying?
And artificial insemination wasn't the only experiment done to increase the number of Aryan births. Dr. Joseph Mengele was especially interested in how to increase the frequency of multiple births. Any twins that were prisoners in Auschwitz were immediately taken to him to be experimented on and to serve as lab rats to whatever kind of tests he wanted, including how each twin reacted to different illnesses and infections. Of the 2,000 pairs of twins that were subjected to testing experiments, only around 80 pairs survived. Sometimes only one twin was allowed to live past the experiments. One such woman who survived with her twin, Miriam, was Eva Kor, and here is her testimony describing exactly what she went through.
We were Mengele twins, which we found out later on what that meant. Mengele would count us every morning, and he wanted to know how many guinea pigs he had this day. I was used in 2 types of experiments. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They would put me naked in a room with my twin sister and many other twins up to 8 hours a day. They would measure every part of my body, compare it to my twin sister, and then compare it to chart. On alternate days, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, they would take us to a blood lab. They would tie both of my arms to restrict the blood flow, take a lot of blood from my left arm, and give me a minimum of 5 injections in the right arm. The content of those injections we didn't know then, nor do we know today. After one of those injections, I became very ill with a very high fever. My legs and arms were swollen and very painful. I was trembling as the August sun was burning my skin, and I had huge red spots covering my body. The next visit to the blood lab, they didn't tie my arms. Instead of that, measure my fever. And I was immediately taken to the hospital. The hospital was another barrack, but it was filled with people who looked to me more dead than alive. Next morning, Mengele came in with 4 other doctors, never ever examined me. He looked at my fever chart, and then he declared, "Too bad. She's so young. She has only 2 weeks to live." For the following 2 weeks, I have only one clear memory: crawling on the barrack floor because I no longer could walk, and crawling to reach a faucet with water at the other end of the barrack. And as I was crawling, I would fade out in and out of consciousness, telling myself, I must survive, I must survive. After 2 weeks, my fever broke, and I felt immediately a lot stronger. It took me another 3 weeks before my fever chart showed normal. Miriam, when I got back, she was sitting on the bed, staring into space. When I asked her what happened to you, she said, I cannot talk about it, I will not talk about it, and we didn't talk about Auschwitz until 1985. When I asked her in 85, Miriam, do you remember when I was taken to the hospital? She said, yes. I said, what happened to you while I was in the hospital? She said, I was under Nazi doctor supervision 24 hours a day. It was the same 2 weeks that Mengele said I would die. So I said to them, what happened to you after the 2 weeks were up? She said she was taken back to the labs, injected with many injections that made her feel very sick. As we found out years later, when she grew up, got married in Israel, expected her first child, she developed severe kidney infections that did not respond to any antibiotic. Second pregnancy in 1963, the infection got so bad that the Israeli doctors studied her, and they found out that Miriam's kidneys never grew larger than the size of a 10-year-old child. So I begged Miriam that not to have any more children, because every pregnancy was a life crisis. But she had a third child, and after the third child was born, her kidneys started to deteriorate, and by 1987 they failed, at which time I donated my left kidney. I had 2 kidneys and 1 sister, so it was an easy choice. But a year later, she developed cancerous polyps in the bladder. The doctors kept asking me to find our Auschwitz files. We never found our files. We never found out what was injected into our bodies. Miriam died June 6, 1993.
Eva Kor's story is not uncommon from those that survived the Nazi medical trials. Many of the victims were never told what was happening to their bodies, and they suffered much longer than the years they spent in concentration camps. It's time for the open letter, everybody. Time for the open letter!
bro.
Dear Nazi doctors, who gave you medical license anyway? And like, why did you have to be so terrible? I mean, you're not the boys from Lord of the Flies. I mean, the Mongols didn't even do that!
The Mongols!
Just because you're given free range to do whatever in the scope of science didn't mean you had to kill as many as possible and tell them they were giving birth to horrible hybrid monsters. That's right, talking about you, Clawberg. So I guess my point is that just because you claim it's in the name of science doesn't make you not a terrible person.
Best wishes,
Izzy and B. Perhaps the most infamous of the Nazi experiments was the testing and utilization of toxic gases as a means of killing many. These gas chambers were not originally designed to kill so many prisoners. In fact, they were first developed to test the effects of certain gases if they were to be used as weapons, and many trials were conducted in which the physicians attempted to reverse the effects of the gas and find an antidote that could be used by the German soldiers in the case that they were attacked.
Whether it was to help find ways to save German soldiers, increase the birth rates of the Aryan race, or just curiosity that led to those experiments, these largely contributed to the massive loss of life that occurred during the Holocaust. But we can only hope that there will never be a next time.
That's all until next time when we dive into summer. Thank you for watching. This has been Knockoff Crash Course World History. Crash Course is produced and directed by Brendan Grimes. Our script supervisor is also Brendan Grimes. Our graphics guy is the one and only Izzy Sasso, and our script sources were the PBS.org Nova Holocaust series. And a special thanks to BuzzFeed Video for lending us the clip of Ava Noor. Crash Course is not at all affiliated with us, and the clips from John Green and Thought Bubble belong to their respectful owners. Thank you.
Sasso, this is Crash Course World History, and today we're studying Nazi experiments. There were up to 70 medical experiment projects conducted by Axis powers. Researchers typically aimed at increasing the technologies for Axis soldiers.
Okay, test. Hi, my name is Izzy Sasso. This is Crash Course World History.
Is that what I sound like? Relatedly, the German government wanted to make it possible for as many perfect, you already said this, ordered him to continue insemination experiments. Over 300 women at Auschwitz were forcibly inseminated, and Clawberg reportedly tortured them and told them that he had impregnated Olivia.
Y'all ready for this?